So, what are your thoughts regarding the current situation between India and Pakistan?
26 civilians were killed, identified for their not being Muslim.
How did you get inspired to join the Indian Army?
I'm army kid, and from the time I was about 4 years old, and this guy's tank went over his tent, and he was under the tank.
So, you are a part of the United Nations as well. So, how was your experience working with them?
Yeah, I was in a United Nations mission, a peacekeeping mission in Angola.
Right. So, you are the only general in the world who completed the Iron Man thrice.
The Ironman is the most difficult and grueling one-day endurance event that there is in the world.
I'm sure you might have had some very challenging terrorist encounters.
They were all over, and they would walk into any house, eat what they want, pick up girls, pick up women.
Hello and welcome to the Michelle David Show. Today we are truly honored and it's a pleasure to have the Iron Man of Indian Army, Major General Vikram Dev Dogra. Welcome to the show, sir. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
How did you get inspired to join the Indian Army?
I'm army kid, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was very overawed by my father, his uniform, the way he used to go to work,
Right.
all the activities that he used to do, his entire lifestyle. So that
Right.
probably somewhere deep inside me left a mark, and I wanted to be like him. He was my first hero. He was my first teacher,
Your inspiration.
my inspiration. So from the time I was around that age, I wanted to join the army. And somehow during my entire schooling,
Right.
that want to join the army never changed. And whenever somebody would ask me from the age of 4, what do you want to do? I would say I want to join the army.
And it is so unusual. I've seen kids, they keep on changing. At times they want to be a rock star, at times they want to be a doctor. But I mean, listening to you, I'm so inspired.
But probably, there was another reason, because the time that I'm talking of was the 60s.
Yes.
And there was no social media, there was no television, there was hardly any exposure to what was happening other than what happened around you. So maybe I never got that exposure that I could be a rock
Right.
star, or I could be a fighter pilot, or it could be somebody else. And maybe that might be it. But yes,
Absolutely.
that was the reason why I wanted to join the army.
So you were in the Tank Regiment. How was the experience out there? And we would love to know some interesting and fun stories.
So, as you're aware, the tanks are the front line of every battle. And when I was in the Indian Military Academy, the tanks always fascinated me. And
Right.
since I had passed out on the top of my course, I could choose any regiment which I wanted. And I chose this regiment called the Pune Horse.
Right.
It's the most decorated regiment of the Indian Army, with 2 Paramveer Chakras. And the regiment fought so valiantly in the 65 operations with Pakistan
Right.
that the Pakistanis gave it the title of Fakr-e-Hind, Pride of India.
Wow.
Yeah. So I joined this regiment, and being in the tanks is very exciting, because despite the fact that I had trained for 4 years before I became an officer, I had no knowledge about tanks. They don't teach you about tanks when they train
Right.
you to be an officer. So when I joined the regiment, I knew less than the junior most Jawan of that regiment, although I was an officer.
Right.
And so there was a little bit of turmoil in my mind, because after 4 years, when you become a second lieutenant, you feel you arrived and you know it all.
Absolutely.
And now you join a regiment and you don't know anything about the equipment. And so I had to
Right.
learn. I did the job of a tank driver, a tank gunner, a tank radio operator, then a tank commander, then a troop leader. And I learned that all from the men who were there, who were meant to work under me.
Right.
But I was learning from them because they knew more than me. So my journey in the regiment, apart from being exciting, was challenging also,
I'm sure
because
about that, yes.
you had to learn new things. And the tank is a big fighting platform with a huge engine, a big gun, big ammunitions. It moves cross country. You for the first time you realize that you don't have to be careful as to where you're driving. You can go over a bush, you can go over a small ditch. You can even go through over a car if it comes in your way,
Wow.
and it doesn't do anything to you. So those are the kind of stuff that you have to learn. So it was a very interesting phase, and I would say you never stop learning actually.
Yes,
Despite
absolutely.
my having been in the regiment for 20 years, I always found that when I was operating on the tank, something new would always come up, something that you had never looked at in that manner, because your perception also keeps changing as you grow in your experience and your service. So it was very exciting.
So, how about some fun experiences? I would love to know more.
So, in those days, we used to go for long war games.
Right,
War games are when you're training for battle. And when you are training for battle, you need to be out in the field like you would be in a battlefield. And we would be out in the winter months, almost 3 months in a year,
right,
November, December, January, because that's the time when the crops used to be cut. In Rajasthan the desert was available for us to exercise because tanks require places to move. And apart from that, it was very good weather. It was a winter months, so it was cold.
right.
And we used to be out, like I said, for about 3 months, and we would simulate war games. That there's one enemy side, there is our own side, and we would do maneuvers and as to how you would operate when you had to travel from one place to the other. Now, there were many, many interesting incidents, and I'll narrate one of them. So, tanks have to move at night
Right.
because you want to keep yourself safe from enemy aircrafts. And so it's more difficult to see tanks at night than it is to see them by day. So therefore, you camouflage and stay hidden by day, and at night you move. And when you move at night, you don't switch on your lights. You're moving in the dark.
In the dark. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And you use your night vision devices, which are part of the tank, to navigate. And you work on a gyroscope. It's like a compass, which you take a bearing. So, for example, I have to go from place A to place B. I don't navigate along tracks. I just take a bearing, and like a ship would in a sea, I start moving. And there's a whole line of tanks, one tank ahead, and others all follow. So that you don't occupy too much area, and you
Right.
reach that place. So this night, I was a major and I was commanding my squadron, and we had a task to move from one place to the other. And the next morning, we had to launch an attack out there. So that night, we moved all night, came to that area, parked, and in the morning, because the attack had to be seen by people, therefore it was a morning attack, we didn't know what the area is like. And there had been movement of such tanks like us from different directions.
Right.
Some had come even on tank transporters, some had come on tracks. So in the morning, when this demonstration started, and we were told, okay, now you need to move, I had to move about 2 kilometers from flank to go and carry out an attack. So I lined up my squadron and I gave them the orders to move, and my tank was leading, all of them falling behind. And there was a huge bush, probably about 10 feet wide, which is in the
Right.
way. So it didn't bother me because it was on my bearing, and I was looking at other stuff. I was making communication with other tanks which were in different locations. So, and since I'd given a bearing to my driver, he was just following that bearing. And as we moved towards that bush, and we were just about 2 feet away, there's a guy who jumped out of it.
Oh my God.
Now, and his pants were down. So, so he
Yeah.
jumped out just in time
Oh,
before he got overrun, and my tank went through the bush, and following me were 13 other tanks, and they all went over the same
oh my
tracks and
God.
all
He
that.
might be remembering it
Yeah,
all his
yeah, and
life.
he was in shock. So later, I mean, we laughed over it later on because this guy obviously had been moving all night and he wanted
Yes.
to relieve himself, and he found this big
Yes.
bush where he didn't know that the tanks are going to come over him. So that was
Absolutely.
like a very funny thing which happened that day. And there were so many such incidents which used to keep happening all
Yes.
the while. In fact, one I must tell you that we were on a night mission like this, and this didn't happen with my tank, but another officer who was leading another squadron, and his tanks got lost.
Oh my God.
And they came and they ran over our own camp. And
Yes.
our cook was in a tent.
Right.
So the guy was sleeping, and when you are in the field, you have all your stuff in your tent. So he had the masalas that he would be using on one side and his own stuff on the other side, and between his bed is put. And this guy's tank went over his tent. And he was
Right.
under the tank.
Oh my God.
Both the
So it
tracks,
was
both the tracks were on either side of him, and he just lay still and prayed to God, and luckily nothing happened.
lucky
Of
him.
course, the tent was flat, all the masala tins were gone, all his luggage was gone, but he survived it.
And not a scratch?
Not a scratch, because
Wow.
when you're under the tank, the tracks are quite wide. It's
Yes.
about almost,
Yes.
I would say about 10 feet under the tank, or even 12 feet. So he was in that area, and so lucky.
Must have
So
been a blessed man.
yeah, so these things keep happening out there. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's another story like this that again we're moving at night,
Yes.
and the tanks for communication, they have huge antennas on top. Those antennas are about, I would say, 8 feet tall,
Right.
and they're flexible because they're like a whip. So whenever the tank is moving, so that it doesn't become rigid and break, they have that flexibility at the bottom. Now we were traveling again at night, and there were these high tension wires which were in the field, which we didn't see. They were low slung, and suddenly my tank antenna, it touched those wires, and there was a
Gosh.
huge spark. Now it's pitch dark. I told
It's
you
pitch
we're
dark.
also in the dark. We're traveling by night. We have no lights on. That flash could be seen for maybe 2-3 kilometers. Luckily, nobody got electrocuted
Oh my God.
because the tank antenna goes into a mast, into a base, which is mounted on rubber, and then there is a wire which goes and connects to the radio set. So that wire got burnt,
I
and
see.
nobody got electrocuted. Otherwise, it could have been a huge problem. And people who were 2-3 kilometers away saw that flash,
Right.
and of course, the transmission started. They couldn't communicate with me because our radio set had burnt out. So they thought this guy's dead. Because, when you get electrocuted like that, anything can happen. It was a scary
In fact, I'm
incident.
sure if I sit with you and start speaking about your experiences, this podcast is going to be never ending actually.
Yeah, there are
Because
hundreds and
I'm
hundreds of
sure you might be
stories.
having
Yeah,
such interesting stories.
there are many of them.
So you are a part of the United Nations as well. So how was your experience working with them?
Yeah, I was in a United Nations mission, a peacekeeping mission in Angola,
Right.
Africa.
Africa.
Yeah. So Angola is the second richest country in Africa after
Right.
South Africa, because it is rich with diamonds and minerals, petrol, and things like that. And because of that, when the Portuguese gave independence to Angola in 1975, a civil war broke out. And the factions of the civil war, one side was being supported by the Americans, and the other side was being supported by the Russians, that time USSR. And both these countries were there not for anything else but for the minerals and the riches which were part of Angola.
Right.
And they had accordingly managed to help the rebels and the government troops carve out their own areas. So the government troops were holding all the cities, and the rebels were in the countryside. And to keep the rebels out of the cities, they had laid rings and rings of minefield all around the towns, so that nobody could come and enter the cities. And therefore, everything which came to the city had to come by air. Our food came by air, our water came by air, our mail, all transport, everything was by air. And if the planes didn't come, you didn't get anything. So that was the kind of situation. And there were something like 10 million mines
Right.
laid in Angola, which were unaccounted for.
Oh
Nobody
my
knew where they
gosh.
were. So there were there were companies which had got huge contracts to demine the area, and that operations were going on. So I reached that place in 1996, February. And of course, we had an orientation of 1 month because we had to operate out there in this environment. Our job was to ensure that the peace which had been brokered by the United Nations did not get broken, and there were no ceasefire violations. And should there be ceasefire violations, our job was to go and investigate them and find out who was responsible, why it happened, and submit a report to the UN. And so after our initial orientation, we were sent to remote locations. So I went to a place called it was the last post of Angola next to Congo, and in between there was a river which divided the two countries, and it was called Luau.
Luau.
Luau. And I thought, United Nations, we'd have the best of the
The
stuff.
best.
I was flown in there by a helicopter. These guys dropped me, when they dropped me, there were two of the officers who were there. They got into the helicopter that we are going on leave for 1 week,
Oh my gosh.
and they pushed off. And I realized I was in this new location. There were three of us, all three brand new. We just landed.
All alone?
All three of
All
us,
three of you.
and all were new. One was a Polish guy,
Right.
one was an Algerian major, and one was me.
Right.
And none of us had been there. We knew nothing about that location. We found there's no electricity out there. There is no water to drink. There's no water to bathe. There were two cars out there. They had left the keys, these two chaps, because they said they had been stuck there for almost 2-3 months. And since our moving in had got delayed, they couldn't go on leave. Now we were stuck in this place. Of course, there were some other UN agencies out there, smaller, like WHO, and there was some MSF, that is another UN organization. So those people came and helped us and told us that you have to go to so and so place to fetch your water. We used to have a truck with a trailer. You go and fill up the water and come and fill jerrycans. Then they told us you have a generator here. This is how you start it, and your lights will come, and you have to switch it off at night, and so on and so forth. And then I found that it was almost like a deserted town. And there were young children at the age of about 11, 12 carrying rifles with ammunition in them. And there were the child soldiers which were around. So all this was new to me because firstly in 96, when I left India for this mission, we were not very wired up. There was no internet in India at that time. We had no idea as to what the rest of the world looked like. So whatever you knew was only if you traveled abroad, and nobody traveled to places where you found child soldiers carrying rifles and ammunition and all. And so it was a very, very, spooky. Yeah, there was a spooky feeling about the mines
very
out
macabre,
there.
actually.
Yeah, and about these little kids with weapons, and life was so cheap. If somebody stopped you and wanted to rob you, you were supposed to give them your car and some money, otherwise they'd shoot you because they had no value for life. So that was the kind of environment. And there, when we used to go for ceasefire violations, there were times when we would enter minefields. And there was this incident which I'll narrate to you where I was driving and this other guy was sitting next to me, and we had two liaison officers with us because whenever there's a ceasefire violation, they are accusing each other that the rebels, they started it or the government troops started it. So there were liaison officers from both of them who were also to guide us and also act as interpreters because the spoken language is Portuguese. And we just knew, broken Portuguese to get along.
Right.
So I was driving, and suddenly when we were talking, we missed one turning. And we entered into a minefield. And having gone in about 20 to 25 feet, one of these guys from the back started shouting, Minas, which means mines.
Mines.
So I braked. Now it was a car, and we were about 20 feet inside the minefield. And we could see on the sides, when I looked, there were these little masks which people had put to mark that it's a minefield. But we missed it in our conversations. So now the challenge was, how do you come out? You can't step out because you don't know where the mine is. It's very difficult to reverse on the same tracks as you went in because it's not a tracked vehicle. A slight touch of the steering wheel, your car would turn.
Gone.
So that 20 feet to come out took maybe 20 minutes. And we were all drenched in sweat because we were thinking, something's going to happen now.
Yes.
It's going to burst now.
It's like a lifetime bomb.
Yeah. But luckily, we reversed out, took a sigh of relief, and then went down and did the thing.
I'm so amazed. I mean, to hear such stories and
another very interesting incident, I'll tell you, that there was another ceasefire violation like this where you couldn't go by road because the area in between had been mined. So we had Russian helicopters with us. They were these big Mi-17 helicopters. They are flown by a crew of 5 people. 2 pilots, 1 navigator, 1 fitment guy, and 1 more guy. And they were all Russian. And they used to carry vodka with them. So they flew us in. There were 2 of us who'd gone. They landed in the field. They said, okay, Major, go and do your ceasefire violation and come back. And while we were away, they were having the vodka. And Russians have a huge capacity to drink.
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
we took about 2 hours. We came back. These guys had probably downed a couple of bottles. And then he tells me, Major, I'm going to show you how we fly nap of the earth. Now, nap of the earth means you're flying along the contours of the
Okay.
earth in a helicopter. If there are trees, you're going through them.
Yes.
You're not just going up and flying normally.
Wow.
So I
And
got
they were
worried
like
because
drunk.
they were drunk and they were getting bored.
Yeah.
But they were very good pilots. And he started off with this big machine. We were chattering along the contours through the trees. Then he said, "I'm going to show you the sight of your life." And he took us to the second highest waterfall in the world.
Oh, wow.
After the Niagara Falls, there is a waterfall on the border with Zimbabwe. And we circled that waterfall twice. It was beautiful, of
Such
course.
an experience.
Yeah. And after that, of course, we taken our photographs, and again he went back to his nap of the earth flying. And luckily, I was so relieved that we landed up safely.
I'm sure I can imagine.
My heart was in my
condition.
mouth, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't stop him, and I couldn't show that I'm scared because I was a major.
You were the major.
From the Indian Army. So things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, how was the social life in the IMA? I have heard some very interesting stories how you met your wife.
So the IMA is one male intensive organization. Now, of course, there are women officers, women cadets who come to the NDA and would be in the IMA soon. But when I was there in the 80s, it was all guys. And we weren't allowed to go out to the town. This is in Dehradun, Indian Military Academy, Dehradun. And once in a week or more likely once a month, you could get time to go out. And it was just short, enough time for you to go and have a nice meal somewhere, maybe watch a movie and come back.
Right.
So there was a scarcity of any social activity. But in my third term, I was something called the Academy Cadet Adjutant. So it's the senior most appointment amongst the cadets whose job is to control all the cadets and report to the adjutant.
Right.
And because I had to report to the adjutant every night, I had a telephone given to me. And this was a Sunday, September of 1981. And I was lying in my room, feeling very bored with myself. And I said, I said, let me now make an anonymous call. I knew the principal out there had 2 daughters.
Okay.
And I had seen the daughters, I didn't know their names.
Right.
So I said, let me make an anonymous call and maybe I can speak to them, and it'll be some interesting.
That was very daring.
But there were no caller IDs in those days.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So nobody knew where the call was coming from. And I still remember the number. It was 292 because these were internal telephones. And I dialed 292 and some female voice picked up the phone and said, hello. And I said, I want to speak to Miss Sharma. The surname was Sharma and I didn't know the name. So I said, Miss Sharma. And the person asked me, which one? I said, the elder one. So this voice handed over the phone, your call. And Miss Sharma, elder one, came online. And I said, my name is Sunny. That's my pet name.
Right.
I didn't want to reveal my actual name.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I said, I'm Sunny and I'd like to be your friend. She says, that's not possible. And she banged the phone. And I rang up again and again and again and again. I did about 9 times and every time I got the same reply.
Yeah.
Then the 10th time when the person picked up the phone, I found there's a different voice. When a person who said hello, and I said, by now I should change my tactics.
Yeah.
Because I have not been successful. So I said, it's been very silly of me to have called again and again like this. And that voice said, yes, it's very stupid of you. So I said, who's speaking? And she said, I am Supriya's mother speaking. So I banged the phone down, but I got the name now.
Supriya.
I found out her name is Supriya, yeah. And so that's how, and then I tried again after next Sunday. And again, and finally, I think after about 3-4 weeks,
You didn't give up?
No, not at all. I convinced Supriya that we will only speak on the phone. We'll never meet in life.
Yeah.
And she was in class 10. So she got convinced. And we started talking. And we kept talking. And I said, okay, I'll call you Sandra. So anytime, whenever I ring up, I'll say, can I speak to Sandra? If it's you, you'll say, of course, speaking. If it's somebody else, I'll say wrong number.
Wrong number.
So we thought it was very smart. So we did that, and it carried on. And then came the fete. IMA used to have a fete where they would have some dancing and some stalls with games and all that. So I told her, I said, today I'll come and ask you for a dance. So she said, but how will I know who you are? I said, you'll come to know. I've got green eyes. You'll come to know.
You recognized her. I mean, you met
I
her.
knew who she was.
Okay.
Of course, I had seen her even before I rang up. I knew that these are the two daughters.
Right.
And I knew I want to speak to the elder one. All that I knew. She didn't know who I was. So I said, you'll recognize me. And we've been speaking for almost 3 months till then, by then. So that day, there was another girl with me who was a friend of mine from Dehradun who'd come. And I had also called her Sandra. So, in that phase.
So the confusion begins then.
No, not confusion. This is smartness.
Okay.
So in that fete, they had a place where you could go and pay some money and request a song. So I requested a song for Sandra from me. So both the Sandras were happy. They thought the song is for them. Anyway, that song played, and then we went to the dance floor, and I saw her standing there, Supriya. So I went to her and I gave her a hard look. I said, can I have a dance with you? And she knew who I was immediately. And she was acting pricey. No, I'm tired. I said, okay. And I had this other girl with me, and we danced and we left. And later, when we were speaking on the phone, she actually felt bad that I didn't, persist and insist that I want to dance with her. Yeah. So I
But
said,
she recognized you.
Of course, she recognized me because I gave her that look, and she knew who I was. So that's the first time we ever saw each other. And then, we kept talking, and then we met in the IB. And then I passed out of the Indian Military Academy, and I went for my first posting, which was in J&K. And those days we used to write letters, so I would write long letters to her. It would take a week for the letter to come. And I couldn't write a letter directly to her because, her parents might see it.
True.
So I found another cadet who was known to their family. So I would write my letters in 2 envelopes. One, the outer envelope was on his name. When he would open that, he would find a letter for her. And when he would go to their house, because he was a family friend, he would deliver the letters to her.
Wow.
So that was a chain. And she would send letters back to me, and she would write in block capitals. So that later on I couldn't blackmail her to say that, she's been writing letters to me and sign them as Sandra. And this continued for maybe 7-8 months. And then I told my parents that, I'm in love and all that, and there's this girl, I want to marry her. And I got a huge moral lecture from my parents.
So you fell in love with the Sandra too?
Sandra too, yeah. Actually, Sandra. So my parents gave me a huge moral lecture that, no, you must focus on your career and this and that and all that. And then whenever I would come, my parents were in Dehradun, and her father was posted there as the principal. I would come and meet her, and we would meet, in a clandestine way. But I would take her home because my parents knew who she was. I introduced them to her and things like that. And then in 1984, I told her I have to come and meet your dad now. And I have to ask him that I want to marry you.
So till then, nobody knew from her side?
Nobody knew.
Oh.
Yeah. So 81 we met, and this was now 1984. I think it was sometime Feb, March. And I rang up her dad. And her father knew who I was. He had taught me English in a National Defense Academy. Earlier, he was a professor there. And then when I moved to IMA, he came as a principal out here. So I rang him up. I said, sir, I've written an article. I want to come and show it to you. So he said, come. And I told Supriya, I said, be sure that you have beer in the fridge. Because I need to fortify myself before I ask him this question. So I landed up, and he asked me, the first question he asked me, what will I have to drink? I said, I'll have some beer. And before he could say Jack Robinson, I had knocked down the entire beer so that I was nice and high. And I showed him the article, and it was a lousy article which I had written. And I knew it, and I'm sure he knew it more than me. Yeah. It was an excuse, and he put it aside. He didn't pass any remark about it. And then I told him, I said, sir, I need to ask you something. He says, yes. I want to marry your daughter.
Oh, wow.
So he had that much of whiskey in his glass. He knocked it off, not a word, went and filled it up again, came and sat down and gave me a hard look. And he said, she's too young. She was in first year that time in college.
Right.
I said, it's okay, I'll wait. But I don't know who you are. So I said, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so. but I haven't met your parents. I said, they'll come and meet you tomorrow. Because I had already told my parents.
You had arranged everything.
Yeah. Now the old man had no answer. He said, okay, bring them over for dinner tomorrow. And then my parents went over for dinner, and the rest is history.
Wow, I love the story actually.
So in 84, we got engaged. And then after she finished her graduation in 86, we got married.
That is so beautiful.
So
I
that's how it
mean,
was. Yeah.
I
So that was my social life in India,
Wow.
in IMA.
So you are the only general in the world who completed the Ironman thrice. So what are the challenges you faced, and what is Ironman all about?
The Ironman is the most difficult and grueling one-day endurance event that there is in the world. It consists of three events. You have to first swim 3.8 kilometers,
Right.
either in the lake or an ocean. It's an open water swim. Thereafter, you have to cycle 180 kilometers, and then you run 42.2 kilometers, and all are back to back, and complete it in 17 hours. And if you do that, you're Ironman.
Wow.
So it's a very grueling event, and I faced a lot of challenges. But the first challenge was my age, because when I did it, I was 58. And everybody around me told me that you're crazy to do it. You'll have a heart attack doing it. Why the hell do you want to do it? You'll get injured, and so on and so forth. Everybody discouraged me. And the biggest challenge so was to convince myself that I can do it, because everybody around me was saying, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. So that was the first challenge which I faced. And it was, like I said, the most difficult thing to start and convince yourself that I can do it. And once that happened, came the second challenge, which was equally tough, was to train for it. I'd never swum 3.8 kilometers. I used to go to the swimming pool, like we all do, swim a few laps, relax, and think that you've done your workout for the day. Now, here was 3.8 kilometers, is not a small amount to swim. Then I had to cycle 180 kilometers and then run 42.2 kilometers. And in the army, you don't run 42 kilometers ever. You run maximum 11 kilometers when you're a young officer. That's a cross country event. And normally, till the age of 40, you run 5 kilometers. There's a thing called the BPET, Battle Physical Efficiency Test. Now I have to do 42 kilometers. So that training itself was very grueling. And I had to do it whilst I was working. I had a job which kept me away from home 10 hours a day. And if I was to take away 8 hours for my sleep, I was left with 6 hours.
How did you manage, working and such a big responsibility?
That's why it was a challenge.
Yes, I'm sure.
And I was the Director General of Resettlement that time, a very busy job. And I couldn't...
A challenging job again.
Yeah, I couldn't disappear from there and say, I'm going running or something. Yes. So 10 hours was there, 8 hours of sleep. And in the balance 6 hours, I had to do everything else, including my training. And the training takes a lot of time, because if you have to swim 3.8 kilometers, you need between 1 to 2 hours.
Right.
If you have to cycle 180 kilometers, you need about 7 hours. And if you have to run 42 kilometers, you need at least 4 to 5 hours. So this time management and creation of time for my training was a huge challenge, and probably needed all my ingenuity as to how to go about doing it.
Sure.
Yeah. And when you are now devoting your time to something like this, obviously you have to take that time from somewhere else.
True.
And that was my next challenge in this terms of I couldn't socialize, because I was training, and I trained for 18 months. So when you're training like that, you can't be going partying and drinking and having fun, because firstly there's no time, and secondly it affects your preparedness.
True.
So social life was one challenge. Family life also became a challenge, because I would get back from office, go for a run from 7 at night to 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. My wife would be home, so she had to wait. She had to make arrangements in the house in such a way that she could accommodate this new routine of mine, that I went off in the morning, came back, changed, now went for a run or a swim from 7 at night to 10 o'clock every weekday. And on Saturday nights, I would go for my cycling, and I would leave the house at 1 at night and cycle from 2 o'clock at night to 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, because that's the time there was hardly any traffic, or there was less traffic. less heat, less pollution in Delhi.
True.
So that was a good time to cycle, but it's a big challenge again. So all that was together when you see, it like becomes like a huge challenge, not only for me, but for my family also.
True.
So these are the kind of challenges I had to face. And then you have to look at your nutrition, your hydration, your injuries, how to manage them, the equipment that you need. Uh, all this was new. So I did a lot of research, a lot of reading. And I'm proud to say that I didn't get injured during this entire event all three times. I was careful on my, rest, make sure I was not getting any sprains or calluses or blisters and so on and so forth. The normal injuries that you get when you do so much of physical activity. So this was entire thing was a huge.
Age is just a number, I believe. As I said,
I believe so. Earlier. I believe so because I did my first Ironman at 58, the second one when I was 59, the third one when I was 62.
And how about your fourth one?
I'm looking at the next one with my son this time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he's already training for his first half Ironman. He's doing it this year in October in Croatia. He lives in Dublin. And next year, we both hope to do it together in Spain.
So didn't he get into the army? He didn't get inspired?
I think he had his own calling. He works with Google.
Oh,
yeah, so he's enjoying his life in Dublin.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's hopefully my fourth, which I would do.
Wonderful. And doing the same with your son. I mean,
yeah, I'm looking forward. Actually, I have two sons, and I told the younger guy also that join us. But he said, no, let the elder guy first do it, and then I'll come because I think he wants to take a little more time.
And it's quite amazing to know since he's not from the army background and, training like that.
Army, I told you, that I was the first serving army officer to do it at 58. So it's not something that the army guys do.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts regarding the current situation between India and Pakistan?
India and Pakistan have been in this funny love-hate relationship ever since independence.
True.
And you're aware that there have been so many incidents of terrorism which have been instigated by Pakistan, where the terrorists have been trained by them, sent into India, right from the Bombay 26/11, where they took over those hotels and 150, 60 odd people were killed. Then there were the Pulwama bomb blasts where we lost a lot of our soldiers and so on and so forth. And now when in Pahalgam, 26 civilians were killed, identified for their not being Muslim, and then killed in front of their families and their wives. That was like the last straw. Actually. Yeah, it was the last straw. And I think this reaction which India has now, this action which India has done now, was much awaited. And it's being applauded by everybody. And I personally also feel it was just, it was required, and it was much overdue. I think right now, India in their briefing has given the message that it was calibrated so that we don't escalate.
I'm sure you might have had some very challenging terrorist encounters. Would love to know more about it.
See, these have been going on for a long time, and I was there in the valley in late 90s, around 97, 98, I was there. And it was a daily affair. That was a time when the terrorists were ruling the roost of the valley.
Yes.
They would travel without being checked. They would carry their Kalashnikovs in the Firins. And they were all over. And they would walk into any house, eat what they want, pick up girls, pick up women, do whatever they wanted. They were like the messiahs who could do anything and do no wrong. And I'm sure a large population was anti them, but were too scared to stop them because they used to tell us that if we refuse the army only probably will beat us. But if we refuse the terrorists, they'll shoot us.
They'll shoot.
So the choice was between getting shot or beaten, and therefore they would not refuse the terrorists. They would conceal them. They would feed them. They would even give them information on the army. So that was the environment in the valley for a long, long, long time. And after a lot of initiatives taken by the government, there would be terrorists who would surrender also. voluntarily surrender because they found that every terrorist has a life, and the life is not too much. 1 year, 2 years, after that, he's bound to get shot. So the people who realize this and want to get out of it would surrender and then help the army find the other terrorists. And I met one terrorist like this, and I had long conversations with him. He narrated to me as to how he had got lured and taken into the terrorist camps across into Pakistan, how they had gone there, how they were trained there, and even in their training, they were not treated well. They were treated with disdain by the Pakistani army as a little inferior. But they were trained, they were armed, and they were sent back. And for every kill that they did, there was a price attached to it. Right. If you killed a lieutenant, you'll get so much money. If you killed a major, you'll get so much money. You kill a colonel, you get so much money. It was more of a game of money. And that was what was lucrative.
Not hatred?
Hatred was there.
Yeah.
But this was like a bonus.
Oh.
To make an incentive.
Right.
That I'm a terrorist, I am there, but if I kill so and so, I get so much money. If I kill so much, I get so much money.
Okay.
So that was the game being played, and the money was all coming from abroad through Pakistan, ISI into this thing, and that's how this was flourishing. It was like a win-win situation for the ISI and for the local terrorists. Mm-hmm. And these guys who were local terrorists became heroes because they had a large following also, because they were like Robin Hoods. Mm-hmm. They would come, they would give money to people, they would sort out their issues. I'm talking not of those people who hated them, but there was a large population who loved them also because they were locals.
Right.
And there were some that time who thought that maybe this is the time for us to get freedom and join Pakistan, or get freedom and become independent, or just get freedom. They may not have considered it so much as to what is the ultimate goal of all this, but they were all taken in by the movement and the wave.
Basically misled.
Yeah, misled. So there were people who used to support them, and they were, like I said, like the Robin Hoods. And that glamour that they got out of it, it became a very lucrative option for children who were at that time coming of age to join these organizations, and then wrought all the problems which we have seen through the years.
Actually, so unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. But then over a period of time, it got contained. The fence came up. There was no fence earlier with Pakistan. Then the fence came up, so the amount of infiltration that could happen reduced. The security forces went after them. The numbers again reduced. Then the change of government happened. Then 370 was removed. And everything has been leading to the development of what you see Srinagar today, where it has become a smart city. Shops are open. Lal Chowk, where you could never even stand. I remember going to Srinagar. It was like a ghost town. Mm-hmm. It was eerie. You didn't know which side a bullet is going to come from. Today, when you go there, you can actually see the tourists who are watching, movies, saying hotels are occupied. Everything is well occupied. So probably that is what was infuriating the people across. And this Pahalgam was one initiative to try and get the tourists away from there.
That's very, it's really sad what happened.
Yeah, but I think that's now been avenged by these strikes that, I would not call it avenged, but I would call it's a very strong message that we will not tolerate terrorism of any kind. And should you support terrorism, we will hit you where it hurts. So that message, I think, has been understood by Pakistan.
Very true. So your message for the viewers?
My message to your viewers, keeping the current situation in mind, would be that we are in difficult times. We must unite as a country. We must support our government and our armed forces. And don't believe in rumors. There'll be lots and lots of psychological warfare happening from across the border, telling you about how India has taken defeats, how the aircrafts have been shot down, and so on and so forth. Only rely on government sources and support your country. Jai Hind.
So thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed being here.
Same here, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sure you all might be truly inspired by the life journey of Major General Vikram Dev Dogra. We'll keep inspiring you with our future stories as well. So keep watching the Michelle David Show. Till then, take care. Jai Hind.